Greed, Hatred, and Ignorance. Part 1. The nature of life is not always smooth sailing. From birth to death, life always tends to challenge us through the ups and downs. When you have a union of 5 aggregates, feelings, emotions, perceptions, mental formation, and consciousness, then we are living beings. In any situation that contains greed, hatred, and ignorance, those aggregates are the answers to help us overcome human sufferings. Suffering is only a part of the journey throughout life, but it is not the end point if we choose to rise above it. Tập đế. The causes to suffering is cravings, aversions, and delusions, which all begin within us. Gautama Buddha once said, "Life is happiness, peace, and nirvana, as long as one can eliminate greed, hatred, and delusions. By then, we will see life full of bliss, happiness, and nirvana." He has provided us with many precise methods to attain the happy state of nirvana. However, we need to have a deeper understanding of what causes pain. Greed, anger, and ignorance are the 3 poisons for this life. Greed is an outrageous desire such as infatuation, lust, or indulgence of things like money, fame, sex, or food. When the desires of one is higher than the usual, the person arises greed and expresses it verbally or by actions. It is more profound if unrealistic thoughts are present. The initial suffering of greed appears, and human greed is endless once the desires are not met. Hatred is anger of the resist and the dislike. When dissatisfied, it is not completed as desired and can create a frustrating inner reaction that is bothersome. The person will want to fight the unpleasant situation and exclude the object. The word hatred is a more precise meaning of resistance. Ignorance is a darkness, not considered good or bad. Ignorant people are not insightful, nor do they consider the correct perception of the situation. Ignorance lacking morality of a person is perceived as losing the nature of self-identity. When we fully understand the depth meaning of these sufferings, greed, hatred, and ignorance, then the practice becomes much more accurate. Gautama Buddha was an enlightening person. His insight was, "Vạn pháp tùy tham thấu." Your mind determines the perception of how you view life. However, your mind is, you see life that way. The dharmas are created by the mind. So what are dharmas? A dharma is a way of thinking, like how life could be perceived as happy, sad, worthless, or not. It all depends on the soul of the human being. When someone is truly happy, they will view everything as gracious and peaceful. But if their mind is consumed with frustration, fatigue, anxiety, and fear, then everything will be unstable. A feeling that hurts us most is anger. We are angry because of the desires we want have not been met. Desires are different from requires. To desire means to want, and oftentimes we do it for ourselves. To require means to ask for what we want and to enforce others to do it for us. Depending on the situation, there is a right time for our desires and requires when we minimize wishful thinking and demands for happiness right away. The only way to diminish our desires and demands is to turn inside us, and nurture the value of the soul. We often think that materialistic and moral comforts will give us a fulfilled feeling of happiness, but it is untrue. The foundation of materialistic objects are impermanent. Its nature is non-existent. True happiness is based upon generosity and kindness. Those are the top two priorities of human life that dignifies the soul in the long run. Our minds are described as the surface of the water on a lake. When the wind blows upon the lake, the surface ripples, and when the wind stops, the surface settles and becomes flat again. We need to comprehend and distinguish the differences between phenomenon and nature. The discomfort feeling is just a phenomenon, and the phenomenon of life is between birth and death and the ups and downs. The phenomenon of a person is comparable to the surface of a lake. If something is unsatisfactory, our phenomenon will change and create upset anger, but then our feelings will come back to normal again. Human nature is the essence of wakefulness with a solid interiority, seeing the situational insights of a story. Gautama Buddha once said, "There are no evil people, but only evil deeds." This statement surpasses all other religions. Action is transient. It is impermanent. It is a phenomenon. Humans are essential. Anyone can be a Buddha on the surface, but that is just a phenomenon if they are unable to use the pure courage and dedication to rigorously practice his spirits and beliefs. The quality of human life is to be embraced. Human beings always want everything done on their own time and ways because sentient beings are geared towards their desires and selfish needs. They often forget that life comes with a collection of unsatisfied wishes. Sometimes things happen as they want them to, and other times, things don't happen as they had imagined them to. Gautama Buddha insisted that if we happily accept things we aim for, then we should also accept the dissatisfaction. We all dream of a steady and peaceful life, but we must learn to also accept the unexpected conditions as much as possible, and not choose to ignore or resist it. This is the underlying truth of life. There are ways to defeat greed, hatred, and ignorance. If we want to reduce greed, we must reduce the desire. If there is less greed, then there is less anger, and then there will be less ignorance. But if the greed is too much, it will lead to anger, and the more anger there is, it will increase the ignorance. So, how do we conquer these sufferings? First, greed. To tame greed, we must set aside our egos and think of helping others by learning the root of generosity and goodness in a way to deal with selfishness. For examples, to tame greed of sex, we must think of the body as dirty and unpleasant. Then the cravings will not rise. To tame the greed of fame, we must learn an egoless lesson that will diminish the greed. We also have to contemplate the importance of life. This life is not permanent and will not live forever to nourish the things we have. Having this mindset will decrease greed. Secondly, anger. All of us at some point will harbor anger inside. Anger is a part of suffering for ourselves and for others. If we want to reduce anger, we must learn not to hold grudges and let unnecessary things go. Only then we can practice the virtue of forgiveness, tolerance, patience, and compassion that will impact our souls. Lastly, ignorance. Going back to Gautama Buddha, he said, "A fire of anger will burn the whole merit forest." When anger rises, ignorance will take the lead. Having wrong intentions due to greed will lead to unpleasant situations because of anger, but ignorance is the most crucial of them all. It does not mesh entirely well with greed, but it does combine greatly with anger. The anger of ignorance is very dangerous because it is very slow to progress and can dictate all the wrongdoings. So, how do we conquer ignorance? First, we must practice asking ourselves every day, what do I do with a hard-to-hear sentence? What should I do with a bad deed? What can I do with an unsatisfied occurrence? When these questions are set in our minds, we will then have an opportunity to think clearly. When we have a chance to think, we also have a chance to remain calm and collected to make the best decisions. We have to be in a state of calmness and insight to identify the right from the wrong. Otherwise, we will be blurred by our ignorance and believe untrue matters. Gautama Buddha said, "When you finally let go, you will be free from defilement." I wrote this article during the time my family and I were infected by COVID-19. This virus attacked my children, husband, and I unexpectedly. As the days went by, we were all in bed, suffering from coughs, fevers, headaches, body aches, and trouble breathing. My husband ended up being hospitalized for treatment. During this time, I dealt with nervousness, worry, fear, and tears. My mind drew a complete blank. I didn't know what to think, what to do, or even what to consider happened to my family, especially my husband. Statistically, 3,000 people died in a day. I asked myself, would my family be a part of that number too? And suddenly, I collapsed. A few days passed, and I don't know from when, but I quickly remembered a word from this article: impermanent. Life is impermanent. Accept it. Accept the unexpected conditions as much as possible. Don't resist it nor fight back. In another lesson, Miracles in the Present, Master Thích, Minh, Niệm advised that when connecting the mind and the body together, soon a miracle will appear. Looking through the window from my bed, I started breathing deeply. I felt my breath going in and going out of my body. I felt my mind in companion with my breath. At that very moment, my nervousness, worry, and fears slowly diminished. I felt peaceful and calm in that moment and hoped that a miracle would appear. I counted each day. 3 weeks went by slowly, but everyone was recovering better and better. I knelt down and bowed my head. Thank you, Buddha and the saint. Thank you to the universe. Thank you to all the people who prayed, helped, and worried for my family. 1 month later, trying to get back to our usual routine, My husband and I got into our convertible and drove around the city. It looked the same as it did before. The streets, houses, and trees, but this time, I felt completely different. My perspective of life has changed. It wasn't about what I saw, but rather about how I felt when I saw it. The feeling was so refreshing, precious, soft, delicate, and comfortable. After the traumatic experience with COVID, I realized the true meaning of life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. We, as the whole world, should help, share, spread love to one another, and pray together.